Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Above the Tree Line podcast, where we answer your questions about faith, culture, Christianity, and God. And we are here,
and all related
and
subjects.
everything in between.
Everything else, which is everything.
And so here we are, once again, with Senior
We're
Pastor
back.
Will Davis Jr.
Hi, Lauren.
from Austin
Good to
Christian
see you,
Fellowship.
sis. Hi, kids. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here.
So we have a couple of questions. Oh, I can't even tell you how many times we've heard this. And I'm already kind of smiling
This is
because I
gonna be
know
so much
exactly
fun.
where you're
This
going
is
to
gonna
go
be
with
so
this.
much fun.
We are going to be talking about cohabitating, male and female, before they're married.
That's a euphemism.
Cohabitation.
Living together in sin.
That's exactly
It's
what
not cohabitation.
cohabiting means.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a euphemism.
So here we go. Pew Research Center study 2019 documented the acceptance of cohabitation among most evangelicals. Specifics that I received directly from the authors show that 58% of white evangelicals say that they believe that cohabiting is acceptable as long as a couple plans to marry. So we are seeing this kind of growing number, but we're also seeing an increase in divorce, right? And the studies from like 10 years ago would say that if you cohabited,
We're with you. Live together.
live
Just call it living
together, then you were more likely to get a divorce. Those numbers have evened out. Now the divorce rates are just off the chart anyways, whether or not you live together. But what would you say if somebody came to you and they said, I love this person, I'm not sure yet if I want to get married, can we live together to see if it would even work?
No. That's what I'd say.
I know that's what you'd say. Now expand upon that.
It's sin. It's temptation and it's sin. And it doesn't look good. And it creates opportunities for all kinds of issues. And so don't play house. Don't act married if you're not willing to be married. So the gateway for a good marriage is covenant, not trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't stick your toe in the water on covenant. And if you can't figure it out in a healthy, moral dating relationship, then you probably shouldn't be married to them. Just don't marry them. But you don't play house and run the risk of all the things that come with acting married and not being married, because the long-term sin effects of that and undermining of covenant are devastating. And it's poor modeling, and it's setting you up for temptation. How much time do you have for me to list these things? It doesn't work. It's a social experiment that has failed. So, there are lots of couples before this new generation came along that says we got to live together that Susie and I didn't. We figured it out. We weren't sexual. We figured it out. We've been married 38 years. So you don't have to live together. It's like test driving a car. This is covenant. And you make the covenant first. And you take divorce off the table and you move in together as you're married and you start acting married, not switching that. Sorry.
Okay.
The answer is no.
So something interesting that you just said. You are implying that if you are living together, that you are engaged in a sexual relationship.
I didn't say that. I think you can be awfully tempted to be. I know couples who try. But the likelihood of an accident happening, let's make it benign, if you're living together with somebody you're greatly attracted to and you're going to go sleep in separate rooms every night, well, what about the night you drink too much or you stay up too late and somebody's tired? It creates opportunities for the devil, which we're not supposed to do. And it doesn't look good. It's not a good witness. The couple down the street gets to live together because they're married. We don't have to. And I don't know what's going on in those bedrooms after midnight. It's not my business. That's not the point. It's not avoiding all the appearances of evil. And we're supposed to avoid every appearance of evil. And sexual sin is evil. So don't even set yourself up to look like you're doing it. So yeah. And I hear all the excuses of, well, financially it's better for us.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed at the couples that made it work in the Great Depression without living together.
They also got married significantly younger.
They did.
So
They did.
Today, the average kind of marrying age is about 30. So this is, I think, something that's kind of troubling. So maybe it was easier for previous generations whose marrying age was closer, especially amongst women, like 17, 18. They had to wait 17, 18 years. And
Wait for what?
to get married, to have a sexual relationship, to live together. Whereas now people aren't getting married until 30. So I think that it's significantly
it's
more
not
difficult.
An entitlement.
No, it's not an
Sex is
entitlement.
not an
But it is
entitlement.
more challenging for this generation to completely abstain from everything for 30 years as opposed to the previous
It's
generation.
challenging if you're feeding the beast.
Right.
You can live a celibate lifestyle and be just fine. 100%.
So it's also interesting because then there you have your fundamentalist Christians who they don't believe, many of them, you should not kiss anyone before marriage. Your first kiss with your spouse is on your wedding day. They get married significantly younger because they're not even kissing anybody till they get married. But then sadly, so many of those relationships, I mean, you don't know who you want to marry at 17, 18, even 21 because your brain isn't even fully developed.
Can we talk about why couples are living together?
Yeah.
Why do you think couples are living together? Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's have
Well,
a
are we
grandpa, curmudgeon-y, granddad talk.
There's a bunch of reasons. One, finances.
Okay.
Two, they're engaged.
So
So in Texas, at least, takes an average of probably 12 months to plan a fantastic wedding.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
12
you have
months?
to book. You have to book your flowers, your
somebody
photographer,
call the
your venue, your church, your
ambulance.
pastor.
So be celibate. If you're going to wait 12
Yeah.
months, that you don't get to have sex until you're married.
But you can be celibate and live in the same house.
It's awfully difficult, and it doesn't look above reproach.
It doesn't look above reproach. No,
doesn't.
I agree.
It doesn't. And it's awfully difficult to stay clean that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got an unwanted pregnancy, or now you've got something else, or you're also just undermining sexual intimacy. You want that wedding night to be everything God designed it to be.
Absolutely.
If you're cutting corners, you're not getting there. And it matters. And bigger deal, God defined marriage. We don't get to redefine
Right.
marriage.
But you're talking about cutting corners.
I'm talking about the institution of a covenant.
Yes.
And that's when the permission to live together kicks in Scripture. You're a girl, I'm a guy. We're not getting in the same room, in the same bathroom, in the same anything until we're in covenant. Covenant's the gateway to any kind of physical intimacy like that.
So then you would say, I'm asking, would you say the same thing for couples who we're going to stay the night at your place tonight, we're going to stay the night at my place tonight, we have two separate places, but we do spend evenings together, not necessarily partaking in sinful behavior.
I think that you can do that. I think it's really risky and it shouldn't be a habit. I think that yeah, if you go visit your girlfriend out of town and you stay overnight and sleep on her couch, great. That can be careful.
I think it's riskier for guys than it is for girls, though. You're speaking about this from a guy's point of view, and I'm speaking of it from a girl's point of view. And I don't think the temptation is as high.
But why would you put yourself in that situation at all?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to play judge on that. I get it, but I just think again, it's don't give the devil an opportunity. And sexual sin's a really big deal, and the implications of it are long term, and significant. And why even mess with it? But I think the bigger issue, which is why I asked you the question a minute ago, is I think our respect for the marriage institution is crumbling.
Yes,
as
absolutely.
Christians.
Absolutely.
As Christians. So that's what I want to address. Is we don't get to redefine. God got to define what marriage is, and just because 48% of Christians think it's a good idea to live together, that didn't tell me anything other than we're getting more depraved. Marriage is a huge deal in culture, and we don't get to redefine it.
And only 55% of Christians are like staying married. Like the divorce numbers are staggering, and it doesn't look different from the rest of the world. And that's with or without living together. That's just the whole respect for the marriage institution
And covenant.
is gone.
And covenant.
Let's talk about common law marriage for a second. So here we have the state will view a couple as married common lawfully. After they cohabited for a certain number of years, they can combine their finances, taxes, health insurance, all that stuff. So are common law marriages in the eyes of God?
I don't know that I can speak specifically for God. I would imagine no, because there's never been that moment of covenant when you stand before the Lord and His people and pledge life and love to each other and to each other alone. Fidelity. You pledged fidelity. You kind of backed your way into a relationship. Because Governor Abbott says you're married, it doesn't mean you're married in God's eyes. And just because Governor Abbott says you're not married any longer doesn't mean you're not married in God's eyes. That's why God said, what man has joined together, let no man separate. That's why the adultery clause is so high in Scripture, because in God's eyes, just because a court says you're not married, you're one flesh with that person. Still. I got a good buddy who got divorced years ago, didn't want the divorce. he's not going to marry anybody else. He thinks he's still married to that girl in God's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So again, with the definitions got really low. So common law marriage is just a sneaky way to get around the covenant. Just because the state says you're married, the state didn't get to make that call.
But I'm just thinking hypothetically, if you have a man and you have a woman who have been together for 50 years, never like they've told each other like I'm only going to be with you, I'm not going to be with anybody else, but they never actually went through a marriage ceremony. You don't think that they're in covenant?
I think they need to go publicly under the world's scrutiny and authority in the churches and say we're pledging this publicly. I want you to hold me accountable as her husband, and vice versa. And great. I tell couples that before I marry them that on a Wednesday or Thursday of your wedding week, go have a private wedding ceremony and pledge your life and your love to each other, because you're going to be crazy on wedding day. Go out somewhere and take communion, and you and the two of you and God have a wedding ceremony. Now, that does not give you the permission to act married, because you haven't done it publicly.
Wait, what? If you go and you make the covenant on a Thursday?
Because the church and the holiness of that moment and the community is a real big part of that. And so I want them to say those words to each other privately and remember that moment, but they need to hold off until they've gone public with that event and gotten the clarity, now we're married in everybody's eyes, we're going to go act married. But I really think that tenderness moment is really important. And I encourage couples to do that. But I also say don't go sleep together the next day because you're not married yet.
What about people, we're talking about the community and the witness. What about people who secretly elope and they don't have the witness?
They've got a witness of a judge somewhere. They've got
a person ordained by the internet.
Yeah, or me.
Yeah.
You know, I did a spontaneous wedding one night. It was supposed to be an engagement party. They actually rented out San Miguel's here in town. It was supposed to be an engagement party, and she walked in a wedding dress. It was the greatest thing ever. But it was still very public, and I put my hands on them and blessed them and sealed them in Jesus' name. They kind of eloped.
Yeah.
They gave an hour's notice, basically. It was a really cool event. But they still did it publicly and did it under a biblical authority and our pastor's authority and got everybody's blessing on it. And that's the difference.
Do you need a marriage certificate to technically be married? Because you can say the state can recognize you as married and God can't. But
if you want the protections that come with marriage in the state, you do. Yeah. I think you need both. I think you need the state. It's again, we're going to obey the laws of the government. We're going to obey the laws of God. Well, marriage has both. Marriage has state laws and marriage has God's laws. And you need to honor both. And God's laws are really the part that's getting negotiated on these days. So I love to ask couples that have been living together. So what does getting married give you don't already have? And they typically say permission or guilt-free. Like, we're already sleeping together. We already have the same bank account. We're sharing a house. We're entwined. But mom and dad don't like it. Or we still feel guilty. Or people get off our back. And I'm like, well, that's important. If you're getting married to relieve shame, then you probably need to think about that. But why get married if you're already acting married? If you're already living as married? If you're already sharing money as married? What does marriage give you? And it's typically they will come to the conclusion and say, we formalized it. I think you start with the formalizing it. And then you act married. That's what the Bible says. Order is a big deal in the Bible. The procedure, step 1, step 2, step 3 are not interchangeable. You don't have children get engaged. I mean, there's a well-known NFL quarterback who's just announced that his girlfriend's pregnant. Everybody's going, way to go, you guys have a baby. Completely out of order. And he's a Christian. Well done. Completely out of order. It's not how you do it. It's a terrible example, and it's not honoring to God. And that stuff matters. That stuff matters. So you formalize it first, and then you go act married. Not vice versa. What we do is we act married and decide to formalize it at some point.
I think it's interesting, though, that I don't know for sure, but I mean, I've said this before. I was kind of like goody two shoes, like follow the rules. So do you think that people who are living together, do you assume that they are having a sexual relationship?
I don't try to think about them, number one.
Right.
I don't have a lot of people in my purview that I think my reputation precedes me these days, and those people are not coming to talk to me.
Right.
Okay. I think they're at least tempted.
And you think they're also sharing like finances and
The number one reason you hear of couples living together is finances. I just call bull on that. I don't buy it. But we really can't afford 2 houses. There's always a way. If you'll honor the Lord, there's always a way around. But if you cut corners, God's not going to come through for you. But if you take the high road and say, we're not going to sleep together, we're not going to live together because of finance, God can provide a way for you to sleep on a couch or me to sleep on a couch. Something will come up if we honor God. But they cut the corners and never find out. But they say, yeah, we can't afford to. We're moving to California. We're moving to Washington, D.C., where we're living in a house together until we get married. I think you're cutting corners.
What about male and female roommates?
That's an interesting question, an interesting phenomenon. I couldn't do it.
Really?
100% no. Gosh, no. I'd be a basket case. I don't want to know. I don't want to be tempted. I mean, I know that's the way the world flies these days, and maybe it's totally celibate and works.
Yeah.
Great. I just think I think there's still a probability and a possibility for temptation that you don't want.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had a in college, totally platonic best friend that was a guy that we were always at the same place. And nothing ever even crossed my mind about having a relationship with this guy. To me, it was like, that's another human being that's in my life. I had a boyfriend outside of that.
Guys are motivated by
I know. And that's why
visual.
I'm wondering if this is a guy thing versus a girl thing.
It doesn't matter. It's still, you got a guy and a girl living together. If the guy's tempted, it's still temptation, and it can still lead to trouble. And so I don't know that I think it's the wisest of ideas.
Okay. Here's something interesting.
This is so much fun.
So, Ruth and Boaz.
Yeah.
Ruth spent the night
Such a great story.
with Boaz. They were not married.
And about 40 of his closest friends. They were basically in a warehouse where they slept to protect the grain, the stuff they'd harvested that day. And she slept at his feet. But he also said, get up early before everybody sees that you're here because I don't want to ruin your reputation. But that was a cultural way of saying, I'm going to submit myself. What do you want to do with me? And Boaz covered her and protected her. But there were also all these workers around them. They weren't alone.
So you can spend the night together if there's a bunch of other people there?
If you're having to look for loopholes, Lauren, it's probably not where you're supposed to be.
You know, I'm always going to play the opposite end of whatever you're representing.
That was a completely different cultural situation, and there was no shenanigans going on. And she was totally dependent on a man for provision. And she was basically saying, will you be my provision? That's how you did it. So there wasn't, there was people all around, so it was a very safe setting.
Okay. All right, I'll let you. I'll give you a pass on that.
In college,
one.
I went camping with the girls and guys.
Yeah.
We'd go camping together, and it's fine. But you make a habit of that, you're liable to wind up in the wrong tent one night. You just got to be careful.
Yeah. Interesting. Because I do know, like, even now, there's some of the some of the youth that I've mentored over the years, like their parents will have these co-ed sleepovers. And this is a very common thing. I feel like I've heard this. I mean, and sometimes it's like, oh, it's prom, it's a co-ed sleepover, or oh, it's our summer co-ed camp on the beach together. And it does seem like this is something that parents are like, well, as long as we're present,
that
we
doesn't feel
are
any different
this.
to me than a lock-in, which was the worst idea ever.
Right.
Like
Right.
the Baptist church, locking kids in a room overnight and daring something not to happen.
That's where I met my first crush, was in a lock-in.
That tells me all I need to know. Like, that's what's really good about that idea. Let's
Right.
lock up a bunch of high school hormonal kids in a room overnight with 2 adult sponsors and ask for nothing to happen.
Right.
Derp, not a good idea.
So ACF's not going to be sponsoring any
Probably not.
lock-ins in the
Probably
near
not.
future.
Yes.
I don't even know if those still exist.
Probably not.
That was kind of a thing of the 90s.
I would hope not. I would hope not.
Okay, so final thoughts. We got about a minute left.
You really want to set yourself up to win. And taking the high road, I got an email from a lady here in our church recently asking me to do her daughter's wedding. And she said, you need to know this couple is doing everything right. She said they understand what engagement is and isn't, and they're honoring God on all levels. And it was so good to hear that the couple is not sleeping together, they're not acting married, they're not stealing from each other. It's until you take a vow, that's not your body to give away, and it's
Right.
not my body to take from you.
Yeah, totally agree.
So set yourself up to win. Go into marriage pure. Don't cut corners. You can live without sex, and you can live without living together. You're not the exception. God will find a way to provide for you if you ask Him to. The implications of not doing it are much bigger than anybody thinks, and it's not worth it.
Right.
That's my bottom line.
And I just want to say, years from now, if my children are watching or listening to this podcast, don't live together with people. Totally agree with you.
Just doesn't make any sense.
But I do like to take the world's perspective and the
to.
world's
I get it.
logic
You're-
and
you're-
bring it
that's-
in
yeah,
this
you
room
need
and
to.
talk about it.
No, it doesn't work. Statistically, it doesn't work.
Right. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Send all emails to
Senior
Lauren-
Pastor.
Lauren Fersen.
No, don't send them to me. Thank you
Thank y'all.
guys for this question. This is something we've heard a lot about. Again, we approach this subject with no judgment. We're not judging people who make choices different from us, but we do want to bring the wisdom of the Word of God and encourage you guys very strongly to apply this to your life and to your choices. So thank you for bearing with us through this. Please join us next week.
We love you guys.